Hello and welcome to Mad About Superheroes Cartoon Showcase. Thanks for joining me in my quest to bring meaning back to Saturday mornings. On this episode, we're going to revisit one of my favorite episodes of the classic Hanna-Barbera Super Friends cartoon series. More specifically, the Death of Superman episode that aired in 1985, on the final season of the long-running series, under the new title, Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians. The Death of Superman episode was co-written by Alan Burnett and John Loy. Both Burnett and Loy had a long history with the Super Friends cartoon series. Alan Burnett went on to write the screenplay for personal favorite Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. The Super Friends underwent quite a few title changes with each new season, such as Challenge of the Super Friends, World's Greatest Super Friends, Super Friends: The Legendary Superpower Show, and finally Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians. The latter of which was a long overdue attempt to grow up along with their audience by upping the stakes and telling more character-driven stories a bit more in line with their comic book counterparts. Although it's baffling that among the many name changes of the series, Hanna-Barbera never went for a more obvious choice and retitled the series The Justice League.
Superman!
My 10-year-old self really appreciated the Superman-centric story. Though he's barely in the episode, his presence is felt throughout the 22-minute runtime. At the time, I had very few Superman comics. My Superman fandom stemmed from the Super Friends cartoon series and the Christopher Reeve film franchise. However, my Superman comic collection grew exponentially upon the 1986 release of writer-artist John Byrne's Man of Steel limited series. In my humble opinion, Byrne's run on Superman is the definitive run. As a fan of the new Teen Titans DC comic series, I really enjoyed the inclusion of Cyborg on the Superpowers team. The Super Friends have a history of trying to inject diversity into the series: Apache Chief, Samurai, El Dorado, etc. Unlike the aforementioned, Cyborg's origin originated in the DC comics as opposed to being created specifically for the cartoon series. The Super Friends series also had a history of inserting teenage characters as avatars for their audience. But personally, Robin, Firestorm, and Cyborg felt a lot less like pandering or patronizing than Marvin and Wendy or the Wonder Twins. The Death of Superman story was no doubt inspired by a 1960s tale told in the Superman comics, written by the Man of Steel's co-creator, Jerry Siegel, in which Superman is tricked into believing that Lex Luthor has reformed from a life of crime. Luthor gets Superman to lower his guard and unleashes a lethal dose of kryptonite on his arch-nemesis. In turn, the Superpowers episode, Death of Superman, may have in some ways inspired the 1993 DC Comics Death of Superman storyline. The similarities can be seen in the episode's opening, which depicts a world mourning the loss of the world's greatest superhero, wearing black armbands in honor of the last son of Krypton, as well as the S-Shield, the crest of the House of El, draped over the fallen hero's casket. A touching send-off ensues, as the Superpowers team bid their fallen comrade a fond farewell and launch him into the sun.
Farewell, good friend. You'll be missed beyond words.
Oh, he's gone, and it's all my fault.
It's soon revealed that while surveying a new planet, Firestorm and Superman split up. The Man of Steel falls victim to kryptonite poisoning. Believing himself to be responsible for Superman's death, a distraught and guilt-ridden Firestorm seeks solace, but he is hounded and captured by paradrones and brought to the villainous Darkseid, who wants the Galactic Guardian to reveal the details of the Man of Steel's demise. The ever-skeptical Darkseid thinks the death of his greatest enemy could be a ruse. Meanwhile, several members of the Superpowers team gather at Superman's Fortress of Solitude, where Superman's robot duplicates reveal evidence indicating that Superman may have survived his exposure to the kryptonite, only if he was able to slip into a Kryptonian trance.
Kryptonian trance? What's that?
A self-hypnotic method to slow down the process of kryptonite poisoning.
The Superpowers team race to retrieve Superman from his collision course with the sun, while Darkseid, now convinced of Superman's death, has infiltrated the Hall of Justice and sets a plan into motion to invade Earth with a legion of his paradrones. Just when all hope seems lost, Superman returns. Darkseid and his lackeys Kalibak, Desaad, and his paradrones are no match for the Man of Steel, and they retreat.
The others! Sire, hurry!
I'll see your demise yet, Man of Steel!
The late, great Danny Dark expertly voices Superman. Dark was the voice of Superman for 12 years, the entire run of the Super Friends series. From 1973 to 1985. Most impressive. Dark, in my opinion, is the definitive voice of the Man of Steel. Other notable voice actors in the Death of Superman episode include Betty Jean Ward as Wonder Woman. Some may recall her as the voice of Scarlet on G.I. Joe. Mark Taylor as Ronald Raymond, Firestorm. And Ulan Sool as Professor Stein. Sool formerly provided the voice of Batman, until the Bright Knight himself, Adam West, took over as the Cape Crusader. From Ghostbusters fame, Ernie Hudson voices Cyborg. Frank Welker pulls triple duty as Darkseid, Kalibak, and the Paradrones. Fun fact, Paradrones are actually referred to as Parademons in the DC Comics. This being a Saturday morning cartoon series, the name change was made to sound less threatening. Frank Welker voiced tons of characters from various cartoons for decades. Personal favorites are Iceman on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and Megatron on Transformers. The legendary opening theme song was composed by Hoyt Curtin, who also provided music for other Hanna-Barbera cartoons, such as The Jetsons, Johnny Quest, and Josie and the Pussycats, to name a few. Any version of the Super Friends theme is instantly recognizable. Once hearing it, you'll be humming it for hours after the fact. DC Comics produced a line of Superpowers comics, but I believe it was more of a cross-promotion with the Kenner toy line than the Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians cartoon series. Many issues of the Superpowers comic series were illustrated by Jack the King Kirby. Kirby was not only the co-creator of Captain America, Fantastic Four, and the Incredible Hulk, among many others for Marvel Comics, he also created the New Gods for DC Comics, most notably the ultimate villain, Darkseid. The Superpowers Kenner toy line was nothing short of epic. I was a very happy 9-year-old when I received the Superpowers Superman action figure on Christmas morning in 1984. The inspiration drawn from the aforementioned Superman issue 141, released in 1961, was simply the title of the story, The Death of Superman, the kryptonite poisoning, and Superman's green skin tone, a side effect of the kryptonite. The original comic story never had a resolution. Sadly, at the end of the issue, Superman is dead, and Supergirl continues the fight for truth, justice, and the American way. The 60s story was conceived as a self-contained story that wasn't in line with any continuing continuity. By the next issue, Superman was alive and well, with no explanation given or necessary. Flash forward to 2005, and we have a more thoughtful and more poignant Death of Superman story in the DC Comics, in All-Star Superman, in which the last son of Krypton is exposed to massive amounts of solar radiation. His cells begin to break down, which will eventually kill him. A villainous plot once again orchestrated by Lex Luthor. But the Man of Steel goes out in a blaze of glory and performs one last ultimate heroic deed. Arguably, the definitive Death of Superman story was told in the sprawling epic battle between Superman and Doomsday in the 1990 DC Comics.
Is everyone...
You did it, Superman. We're safe. All of us.
good? That's all that matters.
But at this point, that story has been done to death. As mentioned, the Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians incarnation of Super Friends was an attempt at telling slightly more complex stories than previous attempts. Though the death of Superman certainly upped the stakes, I'm sure no one watching back in 1985 believed Superman was really dead. There was an established formula, a certainty, a comfort that all would end well, and our hero would return triumphantly to save the day. That said, a befitting platitude springs to mind. Sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. And the Death of Superman episode is a good journey indeed.
Good journey!
Specifically, the world's reaction to Superman's death, his friends' fond farewell, and their mournful visit to the Man of Steel's Fortress of Solitude, as well as Firestorm's regret and guilt for being unable to prevent Superman's exposure to the kryptonite. In the simpler 80s era of Saturday morning cartoons, the Superpowers Death of Superman episode is an absolute standout.
Is it really him?
Just ask Firestorm.
Boy, oh boy, is it great to have you back.
Hey, I'd say a little explanation is in order here.
It's a long story.
Oh, I think we have the time. I think we have all the time in the world.
I hope you've enjoyed this cartoon showcase. Thanks for letting your geek flag fly with Mad About Superheroes.